Hey guys, Kid here, Burn1, Shadowverse Evolved channel, as always, bringing you another top 4 deck review for this past regional that just happened this weekend. Philadelphia here, and we have all the information. It was just posted on the Shadowverse Evolved website, so we'll kind of break it down. So first thing we're going to do is look at the deck distribution. Overall, it's about what I anticipated. BCS being the most popular. Mono is such a strong contender in this meta, along with people who still really enjoy Control Abyss. It's still a relatively powerful deck, in my opinion, as well. Along with Swordcraft, which I personally think is probably one of the best, if not the best deck in this format, by like a slight margin, depending on how you build it. There's definitely room to tinker with the deck itself. But yeah, the fact that BCS and Swordcraft are the two most rep decks is kind of not surprising at this point. I think people kind of figured out now that Mono is just obnoxious when it kind of pops off, especially when it gets some good high rolls, along with Swordcraft has some really great control tools and playing a really strong game plan with Mistalina and Baleon, just getting you like that really high floor for the deck, meaning there's not that many fail cases, except like you don't see Baleon by like before turn 6 essentially. But most decks at this point have built ways to find Baleon before then, so the consistency of Sword is insane. And then Mono has a relatively powerful, consistent deck as well, where it can always, at worst case scenario, like by turn 6, get all the pieces going and still get a push those big swings with the Mono Evo and stuff. Surprisingly, everything else though is relatively low. Pretty surprised that Forestcraft is below 10%. Honestly, I do think Forestcraft is probably the third strongest deck in this format. It does have the most rockiest floor of all the decks, but I do think its ceiling has like really high potential if you can kind of play your way through those games. Other than that, I think it's about what I anticipated overall. Dragon here at 8.6%, Runecraft 14.8%, pretty healthy overall. Kuon is still really powerful, along with people experimenting with Dirt Rune, because Riley's just such a obnoxiously good card for that deck, on top of the fact that Riley can actually be splashed in other decks, just as a small package essentially. So you can see possibly things like Lashena with Riley with some Dirt Rune stuff going on, but mostly focusing on like the being able to abuse Riley along with Lashena. But yeah, other than that, I'm not too surprised with the deck distribution here. I think this is what you should be expecting moving forward. You got to make sure you have good Abyss and Sword matchups if you plan to play something off meta essentially. But yeah, let's look at the first place list. We have here a Dragoncraft list. It's relatively the standard list. The big differences here is they opted to go with having six ramps essentially, 3 Dragon Oracles along with the 3 Pterodons. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't mind going like maybe like 3-2 at the most. I do think it's kind of like overkill when you start getting like these six cards for ramping, because though the deck can take advantage of ramping a little bit, it also doesn't necessarily need the ramp every game. It's like you get one ramp and you're more than happy. It's already feels better than anything. This list also opted to go ahead and play Forte. I guess in some cases they are afraid of some decks, mostly probably Control Abyss, like being able to answer this along with other like off meta decks basically in this meta, because most of the top decks right now don't have really good answers into like the other Storm packages you might be playing. Obviously, like Ogiri Cap here as a 1 of, most lists played as a 3 of, because it's just such a powerful finisher, potentially pushing 10 or more damage depending on what you're doing. Along with they're playing Conflag here as a 1 of. Surprising to see it as a 1 of. I feel like in a way, if you're playing Conflag for this meta, because the biggest thing we're looking at here to blow up boards here is just the Mono matchup. So I'm wondering how often they drew this card against Mono and how impactful it was, because it probably did a lot of work. But the fact that it was only a 1 of is kind of surprising. I feel like this is like, if you're going to tech this card in like these type of decks, I almost feel like you kind of play the minimum 2. I know you get to draw a lot and see a lot, but there's a lot of scenarios where like Valdane comes down, you top check 3, but I guess maybe at that point it's already like too late and you're just kind of waiting to get to Ogiri or your Tyrannosaurus turn to pop off and like kind of clear the board that way. It looks like they cut one Rydia Magna here to just kind of get that extra room to be able to fit the Conflag. I mean, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble remembering that card name. But outside of that, I think the deck is relatively standard overall. For either opting the Forte or Gary Cap or whatever, it's just kind of just whatever you feel like at this point. But yeah, deck looks pretty good overall. Let's take a look at the Evo deck here. It's pretty standard. We got the 3 of Valdane, obviously only 2 of Viridia Magna, and then 2 Fortes, kind of standard if you're playing the 3 Forte. It's always like a 3-2 line. And then opted for the 3 Carrots for the high roll with Ogiri Cap in a sense. So congratulations, good job winning this event with Dragon. Yeah, I mean, it's just a really strong, consistent deck. If you play a lot of monos, which it seems like Abyss was like one of the biggest reps there, they don't have as much healing as like, Sword and Forest and things like that. So the fact that one of the highest represented decks in the room doesn't have really great healing and ways to stop the burn. So when you do hit those really good Valdane high rolls, and even sometimes the mid rolls are really good into this deck as long as you can control the board. And this list looks like it can. So, you can actually close out the games consistently and not have to worry about your opponent just like healing like 10 or more through the game. Sword matches could be a little rough, but if they curve out pretty well and get Valdane, like double Valdane out pretty quick, games kind of can end like that, essentially, especially if the sword player isn't very familiar with the matchup. They can get kind of blown out by Fortes and Ogiri Caps and things like that. So yeah, congratulations once again. Second place here, we have Senpai Salt Abyss list. Basically standard mono. The only difference here is they did cut 1 Gensetsu to play the 1 of Kawi, which I think is a fine choice if you're not a big fan of just having 3 Kawi so you can always see it when possible. I think doing the 1 of Kawi, Gensetsu. I think I said Gensetsu. If you don't like the 3 Gensetsu and you'd rather go like the 2-2 line and then play the 1 Kawi, I think that's completely fine too. Kawi's a powerful card into anything aggro, as well as Gensetsu is as well, but Kawi comes down a turn earlier if you do draw into it when you need it, essentially. Other than that, the deck list is super standard. That was the only difference you would play outside of like the one I did a deck tech on or deck profile on. So yeah, congratulations. Obviously Evo lineup, 3 mono, 3 Nikolai, double Robo Goblin, and then 2 Gensetsu. It's the standard list at this point. When you sit down against mono, you should assume you're basically for a fact about 38 to 39 of the cards in their deck. Usually there's only room for like 1 to 2 changes essentially, and in this case Kawi was their choice to kind of spice up the list into matchups they probably did not like that much. Third place, we have the absolute standard mono list, no different than the deck profile I did. 2 soul conversions for the draw, 3 Gensetsus, 3 of everything else that really matters. Yeah, this is just the standard list. And once again, 3-2, 3-2, which is what we anticipate. Once again, like if you're sitting down against mono, these are the cards you just have to ingrain in your head that this is like every list basically plays this exact list with maybe 1 to 2 changes at most, because there's really not a lot of room in the mono deck to really add your own flair essentially into the list or really tech into anything, because you're so on game plan to just do the mono turns and get into Gensetsus and Techno Lords to kind of close games out. You should anticipate this list is just very refined at this point. We took the list from Japan and it's just so refined that it's just very consistent at doing what it needs to do. And that's all you can really ask, because at the end of the day, this is almost like a mid-range combo deck, essentially. Fourth place here is another Abysscraft list. This is more of a control variant. They do play a small Nacho package, which is kind of interesting. I think one of the big standout cards I don't think people have been like really talking a lot about in the control Abyss matchup is essentially this card right here, Hellblaze Demon. What's interesting about this card is you go hand neutral with this card essentially when you do play it. Like itself is not very, very powerful, but the effect that you get from it can be very powerful. You can hit things like Gensetsu off of it, Yuzuki, Kawi, anything like that, which feels really, really good. And it's another discard outlet to help you basically put your Israfils and Gensetsus in grave or whatever you need in grave to kind of get that high roll turn 6 Death's Breath Evo Israfil or something like that, or Gensetsu. That helps a lot. As far as the Natra package goes, it's kind of whatever in my opinion. I'd have to play around with this a little bit more. Obviously, Viridian Magna is a very, very powerful card, and possibly in this case, Viridian Magna, along with the three of Kawi, is kind of what lets this deck stabilize. They obviously went for a Demonian Punk here, Devil here as well, so they're playing a really great stall game plan. So if they run into aggro, they have a really good way to stall out the game and go into Viridian Magna, heal, and then remove something, and then Kawi as well, until they get into the late stage where they can start looping Israfils, looping Gensetsus to kind of out resource their opponent. I kind of understand like why they added the Desert Pathfinders. The card is not really amazing, but it's another tree generator, and you need to see some type of tree generator before like turn 4 if you're playing a 3 of Viridian Magna, which means you're hoping to like curve out with Viridian Magna on 4 essentially. If not, then you're obviously going for the Omen of Silence here for the discard, and making the sword matchup more awkward. One of the best cards I think into the sword matchup is the Omen of Silence. If you do it on like turn 5, makes their turn 6 play even more awkward with Mistalina, because they can't play the spell because it won't be free. It'll cost 1 more actually. And then yeah, everything else looks pretty solid overall. Opting not to play any of the real hand rip stuff. This is definitely more of a playing for attrition game plan overall, which I like. It seems pretty solid overall. So congratulations. Here is the Evo deck side as well. Surprisingly they went for 3 Israfil Evos and 3 Gensetsu Evos. Usually you see it like 3-2 and then like they save another Evo for something else, but in this case they didn't really have a lot of things to generally Evo, obviously. I might have personally, I might have, if I played the list like this, I might maybe do 2 Israfils, or maybe even just 2 Gensetsus and play a 3rd Viridian Magna Evo maybe. But maybe that doesn't come up too often just because of the fact that the tree generation here is just, you only have 5 cards that generate trees essentially. And of course it's like the best tree generators in neutral in the deck. So that kind of makes sense in that case. Could have cut one of these 2 for maybe a Bellringer Evo. But maybe they felt like the deal 2 damage and saving a card essentially didn't really matter. But obviously they got 4th place, so they knew what they were doing with the list and overall. Yeah, looks like a really solid list. The turnout for this event was really strong as well. I think it was over 136 players. I don't have the exact count on hand, but it was enough to hit the cut to top 16. I'm very curious where all the like top 4, like did they make top 16 barely and then they all like kind of like pushed out? Because I know the person who went undefeated in Swiss lost, I think in round, I think either top 8 or top 16. I think maybe it was top 16. They bricked out. They posted about it on Twitter and I saw it. So they went undefeated and bricked out on top 16 or top 8 match. It was unfortunate for them. But yeah, so these are the lists. I think this is kind of what you should anticipate for the meta. I think the biggest thing you guys need, if you're going to take away anything from this at all, is that BizCraft, you need to be prepared for the mono matchup. If you're not prepared for the mono matchup, things like this happen. Things like this happen. 2nd and 3rd place, both monos, almost the exact same list except for 1 card difference. They're just a standard list. Mono's very consistent, very powerful. I know early on people were like, mono sucks, blah blah blah. This is like, it's a fake deck. It's not a fake deck. Let's be real. In a long, in multiple round format like this, where we're hitting like 7 or more rounds, the consistency and floor of mono and like the way it feels is very beneficial. I wouldn't be surprised by the end of this format I actually walk away going, you know what, actually mono was the best deck in the format. It does a lot of things very well, with the fact that it can build a wide board and pressure your opponent indirectly because they have to always be afraid of the mono turn, which is something spooky. And then this next biggest thing, even though it didn't make any of top 4 here, Sword is a very popular craft to be playing. Natra Sword is very strong. Right now it's my biggest contender for best deck in the format. And I think with the right pilot, like I said, the floor for Swordcraft is so good, and with the right pilot who knows like all the matchups very well, they can easily cut through all of the Swiss and cut through top 8 as well, or top 16 or whatever we have here for these events. But yeah, so make sure if the takeaway from this is what the meta is going to look like moving forward. You need to be prepared for Sword. You need to be prepared for BizCraft, especially mono. If your deck folds to one of those decks very easily, you got to be happy. You got to be happy with your choice and be fine with just taking the L against mono or taking the L against Swordcraft, not just Sword, that is. Those are the major decks I think I would at least, always have a good game plan into, always know the matchup the most, because those are the matchups you have the highest percentage of hitting in Swiss if you're going to these regionals. But yeah, with that being said, guys, hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure if you like this type of content, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that. It helps me know what you guys like to see, and I also like doing kind of like these small, shorter videos where we kind of talk about these regionals. It's always a lot of fun. But yeah, with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Later, everyone.